Be mindful of what you measure. An empowering perspective from the fable of Claire and Patch. Written, illustrated, and prompt engineered by Senseilue. Although this book benefited from the assistance of large language models and generative AI from multiple sources including Image Creator from Designer using DALL-E 3, Adobe Firefly Model 1, Copilot with Bing Chat, ChatGPT by OpenAI, and Bard by Google AI, it was inspired by genuine life experiences, human passion and emotion. In a faraway land where the rabbits roam, there lived two pedagogues, you know? The teachers in this poem. Claire was a clever and curious bunny, who loved to make learning exciting and funny. She taught her students to think and to ponder, and helped them discover the world and its wonder. Patch was a by the book, dutiful rabbit, who stuck to his routines and rigid habits. He taught his students to read and to write, and made them memorize, by day and by night. He did not care if his students liked him or not. For Patch, the enforcer, this role would mean a lot. One day, the school announced a major decision. Learning assessments would see another revision. An epic test to measure student proficiency. Calling out teachers for instructional deficiency. A performance review, designed by Principal Powell, who said this school board assessment was fair and not foul. Claire was skeptical about the new board appraisal. She said proficiency misunderstood, was not the same as able. When proficiency is left undefined, everyone looks sensational. In the real world, life and learning are fluid and contextual. Assessing without using benchmarks is reasonably questionable. Learning styles and needs are individual, and not always sequential. Teaching requires personalization, more personal and personable. Proficiency is personal progress, developmentally attainable. Claire explained her role as a teacher. Facilitate learning, for all rabbit creatures. Respect diversity and deepen soft knowledge. Prepare the bunnies for careers in college. Patch welcomed the longer, more uniform examination. He had a different viewpoint on the purpose of education. Patch believed that learning was about memorizing facts, and that critical thinking was only for hacks. You see, Patch measured learning by the length of a test. He said learning is enduring, no time for recess. The day of the big assessment finally arrived, and the students were nervous and terrified. They were told to answer more than 100 questions. History, science, language arts, and complex fractions. The test was difficult, long, and exhausting. Weary students were worn, with eyes crisscrossing. Claire's students tried their very best, but they did not do as well as the rest. A lot of things, but not this subject matter. They had learned to think, but not to spew out data. They felt sadly disappointed and awfully ashamed. They were told who had failed, and who to blame. Patch's students did very well on the test. They scored higher, much higher, than all the rest. They knew all the facts, and they could recite them fast. They had learned to memorize data, not to think or to ask. After the test, the results were announced. The school became divided, as some were denounced. Mr. Powell praised Patch and his students for their scores, gave them medals, trophies, and more. He said Claire was to blame for the students' subpar. Powell gave her a disturbing warning and rated her 2 stars. Claire was upset by the principal's judgment. She said it was unfair, unjust, and awfully unpleasant. She knew that her students had learned a lot. She felt marginalized and less valued for what she had taught. Patch was ever so pleased by the principal's praise. He thought it was well deserved, and was not at all fazed. He believed that he and his students had done a lot. They were justly rewarded for what they had got. Honestly, Patch did not care about the school board appraisal. His mission: avoid the village fool and bad teacher label. Claire decided to take action and begin a change. She wanted to challenge Powell's vision and his range. She asked him to visit the school watercourse and see where students develop grit and navigate independently. She hoped he would realize, and have to admit, that there was more to learning than he saw fit. Patch decided to sit back and enjoy his fame. He had all the momentum to win the assessment game. He did not want to visit Claire's classroom and see how her students learned and grew independently. He secretly feared he would lose and regret that there was more to learning than he would allow or let. The next day, the principal came to visit Claire. He saw her students working in groups and pairs, critical thinking, problem solving, and analytical biz. Creating, curating, and communicating ideas. Students were learning by doing, experiencing, and testing. In Powell's opinion, he saw no one resting. Principal Powell was surprised by what he saw. He had never seen such learning before. He asked Claire how she taught her students, and if learning outcomes were focused and prudent. Claire said problem solving and root causes were essential. Learning critical thinking was vital, not inconsequential. She asked students about their goals and the purpose of education. Teaching economics and moral dilemmas, without reservation. She taught students to be mindful of what they measure. It's the driving force of what makes them better. Mr. Powell went on to speak with Mr. Patch. His quiet classroom was obviously no match. It was seriously silent and noticeably unenjoyable. Students memorizing, insanely in peril. Mr. Powell was quick to appraise what he saw. He had seen this style of learning as an intellectual faux pas. He asked Patch how he taught his students, what they could do, and what they couldn't. Patch said he didn't bother to teach his students how to think. All questions in life were black or white, not rose, not pink. Principal Powell realized that he had made a mistake. He had judged learning outcomes by the wrong measuring stick. He had measured them by a test that was irrationally not fair. Unable to capture proficiency, no outcomes found here. He had ignored the diversity in the depths of learning. Offered no plans for winning, nothing reassuring. No clarity, no parity, only patchy fog and more ambiguity. It was time to recalibrate, innovate, and use ingenuity. Principal Powell apologized to Claire and her students. He acknowledged his blunder and his blistering disturbance. He praised them for good citizenship and academic standing. He praised them for hitting marks and incredible landings. He told Claire's students to be mindful for good measure. When we search for more meaning, we will find the treasure. Powell enlightened Patch and his students. He said they had missed the mark and could be more prudent. He checked their depth of knowledge, for skills and understanding. Challenged them to dive deeper, and keep their minds expanding. Claire and her students were happy and grateful. They thanked Mr. Powell for being humble and faithful. They asked him to join them on a new learning journey. Share his thoughts and feelings about what made him worry. He spoke with the students about what mattered most: kindness, respect, self-confidence, and good mental health. Powell spoke of his affirmations and the purpose of education. His students were angry and resentful. They said Powell was inconsistent and even detrimental. Teaching the kids to memorize was Patch's bailiwick. Was it time to move on, or was it time to show grit? Patch could not be compelled to use a new form of measure. Making changes to his curriculum was more work and less leisure. Principal Powell learned a valuable lesson that day. What we measure is what we treasure. It defines us. Some say there's more than one way to show progress and compare. Growth is more meaningful when we have more evidence to share. Powell learned to appreciate the complexity of discerning, respect a range of teaching methods, and the diversity of learning. The empowering perspective of Claire and Patch teaches us anything could be true, given the right context. Meaningful outcomes are the result of relevant objectives, linked to personal values, priorities, and nuanced perspectives. Learning critical thinking in education is foundational to fulfill its noble purpose, uncommon and atypical. The mission of education is to improve the human condition. The moral of the story: if you intend to hit your mark, bullseye, be mindful of what you measure. If you want to be remarkable, then context matters. Stay focused on your purpose. Your outcomes objectives start with your assumptions, your empowering perspective.
What is your mission or purpose? Confirm your assumptions. What, if any, assumptions did Powell, Claire, and Patch have about the mission or purpose of education? Why does public education exist? What economic purpose and outcomes do you serve? Example: the purpose of education is to develop the labor workforce to lower unemployment. How will you be judged or measured? Check your performance scorecard. How were Claire, Patch, and their students evaluated at the beginning and the end? What do you believe were the board's expectations of Powell? What matters most to your evaluator and why? Example: a school board expects accountability and wants empirical and verifiable data for comparison. What is your bias for success? Codify your empowering perspective. Claire and Patch viewed success differently. What did the two share in common? How do your values, priorities, and cultural perspectives influence your actions and reveal the duality of humanity? How will you codify success? Example, Jean Valjean and Javert in Victor Hugo's Les Miserables had conflicting perspectives. Yet, both had deep moral convictions, a strong sense of duty, a capacity for sacrifice, and experienced internal conflict. How do you decide what matters most? Check your assumption, empowering perspective, and then ask, 1. What does success look like? 2. What is mission critical? 3. Rank order and ask why 5 times.